In this episode of CARPe Diem.
Travel during times of COVID.
I'm not too worried.
We discuss international and local travel with guests Sandra Thomas, Marsha Walden, and Tarita Davenport.
CARPe Diem, seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome. As of August 2020, BC is in phase 3 of our restart plan. In this episode, I talk to travel experts to give us safety tips and accessible destinations. But first, what about international travel? Kier Junos tells us more.
We're interacting with more people, and by following the advice of public health officers and officials, we've been able to keep our transmission rates flat. And that's thanks to the hard work of British Columbians, and I believe that the announcement of the next step of our provincial restart plan is appropriate.
We're fortunate in British Columbia because we've entered phase 3 of our restart plan, allowing travel throughout the province. But the state of travel around the world is much more varied. Travel health notices in Canada assign threat levels for different countries. Right now, it's at level 3 for all countries, which means avoid non-essential travel. Anyone who does have a good enough reason to enter Canada has to quarantine for 14 days, complete with a mandatory quarantine plan. That plan should confirm your place to stay, how you'll get there, how you'll get your groceries, access essential services, and medical care. The European Union recently lifted travel restrictions for third countries like Canada. That means I could go to Spain if I had a really good reason. The government decides what's an essential reason and what isn't. And even if you have an essential reason to travel, your insurance might not cover any health expenses, or you might face strict quarantines at your own cost. Such are the consequences of moving around the world during a travel advisory.
So, I'll be wearing a mask. I'll ask you a few health-related questions and take your temperature before you board.
Being fastidious about not allowing people with symptoms on aircraft, and that's something that's a shared responsibility between the airlines and people who are traveling.
A decrease in global coronavirus cases and broad successful treatments will indicate when British Columbia decides to enter phase 4 of its restart plan. That allows international tourists into the province. For CARPe Diem, I'm Kier Junos.
My question is, when can I safely go to Spain? I reached out to my friend and travel journalist, Sandra Thomas. Sandra, it's great to have you with us. Let's talk travel. You're a travel journalist. What are your colleagues saying? What's happening in your industry?
What everybody's saying right now is, if you have to travel, keep it local and travel responsibly. Most people I know aren't traveling for pleasure right now, but just for business if they have to.
Now, the EU just is accepting Canadian travelers. Is there any restrictions between Canada and the EU right now, or can we just go?
You can just go to anywhere in the EU except for Ireland. Ireland did not agree to that. So they're still fairly restricted, but every place else in the EU you can travel to. But keep in mind, as soon as you get home, you have a 14-day self-isolation period. And if you're showing any signs of a cold or anything, it's 14 days quarantine. That means you go straight from the airport to home. You do not go grocery shopping. You do not stop. You have to quarantine.
Now, I'm waiting patiently for the day that I feel comfortable going to Spain to visit my family. So right now, with what you know, tell me what my trip to Spain would look like from the minute I get to the airport to the minute I get back home. What is my experience going to be like getting on that plane?
Okay, well, when you get to the airport, the one that you have to wear a mask. You are not going anywhere without a mask. When you get there, there's going to be a lot of, they're hoping that people will embrace touchless check-in. They don't want you at the counter, but there is a way, if you need help, you can scan your phone and get a number and they'll buzz you when it's time to check in. Then when you get to the boarding gate, they're going to be really strict about boarding times. They're going to close those gates 30 minutes beforehand. Also, the boarding is going to look different. When they call your zone, you're not allowed to like all jump up and stand around like everybody does. Instead, you just have to go by the number, and they're going to be boarding from rear to front and from window to aisle.
Right. And so I take it this is wearing a mask the whole time. I've heard that, right?
You absolutely have to wear a mask. They can actually refuse you boarding if you don't wear a mask. And you either have a mask or you don't get on the plane. That's it. You have to keep the mask on the whole time.
Sandra, there's been a lot of talk about the middle seat. What's the latest on that?
Well, Carmen, initially, Air Canada and WestJet, I'll just talk about these Canadian carriers right now, they weren't selling the middle seat to allow for some social distancing. But in the past week or so, they've both announced that they are going to be selling those middle seats, and they will be selling their flights to capacity. So, but Air Canada at least, and I wasn't sure about WestJet, but Air Canada, they will let you know 24 hours before your flight just how full your flight is. If you're not comfortable with that, they will give you 3 days to book your flight.
How are you and your colleagues managing the invitations and your own concerns? Are you traveling?
No, I belong to a North American travel writers group, a Canadian travel writers group, and several Facebook groups which contain writers from all around the world. Nobody's traveling except within their own country. So everybody's still pushing, we are as writers pushing local travel. And right now, so travel in BC is important and supporting all those businesses. But right now, nobody I know is traveling unless it's mandatory or for business.
When do you feel, just, I know it's hypothetical and projection, but when do you think it might be okay to fly again internationally?
And I think when people said October, that was prior to thought there might be a second wave, or watching what's going on in the United States. I think early 2021 would be safe.
Sandra, you've been talking to tourist destinations around the world. Which ones are looking like they would be welcoming to us?
Well, I just received a press release today from French Polynesia, and as of July 15th, they are welcoming travelers from all around the world. They've been COVID-free for a long time, and a lot of the Caribbean countries have also been COVID-free for a long time, so they're welcoming tourists back from around the world. But you have to consider that when you get there, you either have to bring negative COVID test that's been taken within the past 7 weeks, or for $100 American, you can have one at the airport, but then that means you have to self-isolate or quarantine in your room for at least 48 hours. And don't forget, when you get home, you need to self-isolate for 14 days. There's no getting around that. When you fly home from anywhere to Canada, there's a phone number you have to register, and they will check to make sure that you're staying home.
Sandra, thank you so much for all your words of wisdom, and I'm going to follow your lead and discover BC and explore my beautiful province. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmen. I think you're really going to enjoy exploring BC this summer.
Looks like I need to wait on my European travel plans. We'll be right back. But first, Dean Atwell went to the airport to find out how people are feeling about boarding a plane in the COVID era.
So we're almost back to full capacity here at the airport, we'd say. In terms of flights?
We're not back at full capacity. We are probably somewhere in the 35 to 50% range.
Okay.
Depending on what day.
So air travel after COVID must have just dropped.
Oh yes, yeah. We dropped from roughly 90,000 a month down to about 5,000 or 6,000. So.
Wow. How do you feel about air travel right now? How do you think people are feeling about it? What do you feel about it?
New normal, what can I tell you?
Right?
I wouldn't do it.
Me neither.
Why not?
Nope.
Why?
Because of social distancing. That's the reason why.
What would need to happen for you to travel out on a plane again?
A vaccine.
Going back to London, Ontario. Yeah.
How do you feel about air travel right now?
I'm not too worried. Yeah.
Oh, I feel very safe. Yeah, I think they're doing a great job.
Bring your mask. Wear it on the plane, and no exceptions.
What do you think are the thoughts most people thinking about air travel at this time?
I think most people, when it comes to air travel, the first thing they're looking for is safety. And so the airlines and the operator, in this case the airport, the city of Abbotsford, needs to ensure and put in place protocols that the passengers feel safe. Once they get on an airplane, of course, that's a different set of protocols that takes place, but I think as long as the airlines do what they need to do to make sure that no one gets on an aircraft that is sick or has been outside of the country, I think you're going to see passengers slowly come back month by month, and maybe by the fall we'll be maybe 3/4 of the way to where we were before.
Still ahead on CARPe Diem.
We have a collection of 6 experiences that really give you a different sampling of all that British Columbia has to offer.
CARPe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. Before the break, we spoke about air travel. Now, let's talk about vacation in our own province. I spoke to Marsha Walden to see what British Columbia has to offer.
We have a collection of 6 experiences that really give you a different sampling of all that British Columbia has to offer. If you go off to the explorebc.com website, that's sort of our landing page and our invitation to see all that there is in British Columbia. So it'll give you a sense from that 6 experience collections that I mentioned, what might appeal to you, whether it's the ranch lands of the Caribou, or you're into the adventure of mountain biking and doing some hiking and lake activities in the Kootenay Rockies. Once you have a taste of maybe what you're up for, then the website you're linked immediately into our broader website at hellobc.com, and that gives you all the details. And I hope most people would find it a pretty comprehensive resource.
Well, not only is it comprehensive, but it's step by step.
Given that these are pretty unusual times for travelers, we have a whole section called Know Before You Go. And that's really to give you some thought starters about the kinds of questions you might want to ask tourism operators in advance of getting there, or to understand what part of their operations are open, what might be closed for a little longer, what else is open and available in town, so you really set your expectations in the right way before you head off to a destination. And it also, of course, continues to reinforce all those great travel manners. We want to be very respectful about the health and safety protocols that we've all learned to observe in these last few months, and take those with us as we travel and make sure that we're keeping other communities safe.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your office and the impact that tourism has in this province.
Never have we ever felt its absence more than now. Every year we produce about $21 billion in revenue that supports about 162,000 jobs. And interestingly, those jobs can be found in every part of the province. It's not like some jobs where, mining, for instance, you may find a lot more mining in the north than you're going to find in urban centers. But tourism is everywhere, and it not only brings jobs, but it brings amenities to our communities that we may forget would probably not be viable were it not for the tourists adding their volume to it. So you think about all the great cultural centers or museums or festivals that are hosted in every corner of BC. Those things can continue to exist for residents because visitors help to add their spending and make it more viable. So, the fact that cruise ships are not coming to Vancouver or Victoria this year, the fact that meetings and conventions have all been canceled, the fact that our borders have closed. Our hotels in Vancouver are doing less than 20% occupancy right now. And that's about the same for incredibly popular experiences. So you think about all the great things there are to see and do in some of our urban centers, whether it's Butchart Gardens or Capilano Suspension Bridge or the Vancouver Aquarium. Those are really, really suffering because we don't have that international visitation, and we need British Columbians to want to explore those things in their own backyard this year.
What a marvelous province we live in. When we come back, we'll talk about traveling with special requirements.
Still ahead on CARPe Diem.
So nowadays, we are really happy because everybody, no matter if they can walk or not, can visit the full way of the cave.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Hello again. As Canadians age, we need special considerations and requirements for traveling. I spoke to Tarita, who is an accessible travel specialist. I asked her for some tips, and I started by asking her, how big is the market for accessible tourism?
The accessible tourism sector has essentially $1 trillion that they have to spend on travel. And that's of course including the baby boomers, it's the whole demographic. So there's a lot of money on the table that they want to spend. They just want to be accommodated. These clients require certain specific requirements in order for them to be able to travel confidently. Once they know that that is the case, that they will be assisted, they're quite happy to book and confirm holidays.
And of course, there is the added concern that your immunity may be compromised, because then you are also immunocompromised. So that is another challenge that you have to be extra careful about, right?
I have MS, so I myself being compromised, anything can happen. You can catch any bug, you can have things go wrong, and you just sort of have to be cautious. And you know what? If it means wearing a face mask when you're traveling, wear a face mask. I do have a lot of clients say I'm not traveling until there's a vaccine, and that's completely warranted.
What other top tips would you give our viewers?
I would tell them as well to consider when they want to travel and how long they want to travel for and where they want to travel and what is their budget. That's a big thing. What can you really afford to do? You know, we have clients that are on pensions that they really budget. They include travel, but they budget their trips. So what is your budget for this trip? What would you like to see new? What are your fears? We ask you to tell us, what are you concerned about? So that we can alleviate those by answering your questions. And then plan a date. We tell people, give us two-week time span. So we have an idea of where you would like to, what time frame you'd like to visit. And then it's just about planning. And that's really about it. The first step is to say, nope, we want to go away.
Thank you so much, Tarita.
Thank you, Carmen. It's wonderful to talk about traveling.
Speaking of accessibility, I want to take you to my home country of Spain. I filmed this video in 2019 and I can't wait to return. We will be right back.
I'm in Cantabria, northern Spain, a country of 47 million people where 20% are over the age of 65. It's very important to the population here that we have accessible streets, plazas that everybody can access, and UNESCO World Heritage sites like this one are open for tourism. And so today, we're going to go into the magical world of the Cueva of El Soplao.
It was in 2005 when the cave was open to public. We realized that the cave wasn't able to be visited for everybody.
Sí, es un certificado de accesibilidad universal que es la única cueva en Europa que dispone de él. De hecho, por ejemplo, en España solamente hay 3 museos de cierto prestigio que lo tienen, que son Para nosotros es una satisfacción no solamente por dar un servicio a las personas con discapacidad, sino porque contribuimos a que muchas personas, familiares de ellos, puedan visitar estas instalaciones que son muy bellas y que, bueno, pues hasta hace poco era el 90% visitable y ahora, como se puede ver en las imágenes, se ha construido un elevador para que la cueva sea accesible al 100%.
So nowadays we are really happy because everybody, no matter if they can walk or not, can visit the full way of the cave.
Spain was the world's second biggest tourism destination, with 84 million visitors in 2019. Due to COVID, a 2-month lockdown was enacted on March 6, 2020. On June 2nd, 78% of the country entered into phase 3. The cave opened again on June 6th, but just for locals. El Soplao started 2020 with record-setting attendance numbers in January and anticipated surpassing their annual 240,000 visitors. Now, the cave operates at 50% capacity, with all safety protocols strictly enforced for the limited 70 visitors a day. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. What an amazing experience. For more information, go to elsoplao.es. And of course, come to Cantabria. It's beautiful up here.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
We know from CARPE surveys that travel is a top priority for you. Let's be safe and hope that we can resume our pursuit of happiness in faraway shores soon. I want to thank my guests for the input and tips. And if you'd like to see a conversation here, get in touch. And that's the show. Remember, as our CARPE president, Moses Neimer, always says, the best way to keep going is to keep going. So, CARPE Diem and seize your day.